On today's show, how to discover the adventure in everyday life. Logan Wolfram wants to see women understand their value as God's precious daughter. This passion is realized in her work with Alum, a blogging community and conference where Logan hosts women from around the globe. This energetic wife, mother, and speaker recently penned the book Curious Faith, where she explores her journey of overcoming broken dreams and embracing the call of God. Out of the overflow, Logan also raises thousands for war-torn countries, purposing to clothe, feed, and give medical aid to women and children. Please welcome from South Carolina, Logan Wolfram. Hey, Logan, welcome. It's good to have you
Hi,
here.
it's so good to be here. Thanks for having me.
Now, we're going to talk about this book, and you called it Curious Faith. I've seen a lot of books about different kinds of faith, but never Curious Faith. What do you mean by that title?
Well, I think the idea of curiosity came to me really when I was watching a movie with my kids one day. You know, as you're an adult, you begin to see things differently that you saw as a child. And I was watching Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory with my kids, and which is one of my all-time favorites. Who couldn't love a movie about, you know, a land of candy? Good. And so, anyways, I was watching, and as all of the characters sort of developed, I noticed that the kid who won the keys to the kingdom in the end was the one that was humble and was curious. He wasn't the one that tried to jump at an opportunity before it was ready, or was prideful about the way that he thought things should go, or selfish. And so I really just began to think about the idea of curiosity in terms of being able to see the vision of the Creator and being able to follow that, you know, that you win the keys to the kingdom when you can trust that the vision of the Creator is beautiful, beyond what you could have imagined for yourself. So that was really where it came from. And then I just started thinking about that in terms of faith, of what does it look like to be curious, not just about God, but for Him, like a kind of a guttural desire to have things unfold, you know, before you. So
we were talking in the green room, and you were mentioning how that, you know, every little girl and little guy has got this desire for this dream life, you know? And we have so many beautiful, I think, you know, Cinderella, Sleeping Beauty. But then when life hits you with certain things, do you think people just start quitting?
I do. I think, and I don't even know sometimes if it's quitting so much as like a sense of resignation, just to maybe not hope anymore. You know, I think when there's enough hard things in life that sometimes we don't want to keep hoping because we don't want to be disappointed. And so I think as people stop hoping, oftentimes on the flip side of that, they start kind of trying to control things. And then the tighter you try to control something, the less you find yourself hopeful, and you can't be curious about something that you control. And so I think it becomes sort of this self-fulfilling prophecy to get you stuck. And so I think when we're stuck in a place that we're not curious about what God has for us, it just prevents us from being able to see the things unfold that He does have.
So we live these safe lives of, we don't want to be hurt again. We don't want to be disappointed again. So why even try for something that you can't control? And I think a lot of us become control freaks.
Totally. I mean,
Were you one? Are you one?
I mean, you know, everybody is a little bit. I think we all have different things that we try to control, and whether we're a control freak or not, I mean, we want to see things ordered in such a way that they're not painful, you know? And so, but we live in a fallen world, and so there are going to be painful things. So the question becomes, are we going to look forward to living the life that we have, or are we going to be resigned to allow it to just kind of happen to us, you know? And so I think that the story of Christ is a redemption story. It's a win in the end. And so, I mean, there's something to look forward to in that, you know?
How do you handle it when, you know, you're having a great year, you're looking forward to it, you've got 2 sons, a husband, and then something happens that's discouragement, disappointment? What have you done? Or tell me a little bit about that, because how have you found a way to get through back to living curiously again?
Well, actually, this year personally has actually been a hard year. And so I was recently diagnosed with some autoimmune disease, and have been trying to kind of get through that and figure out what does that look like. And there's a principle that I talk about in Curious Faith, and I call it praying the opposites. It's been a huge tool for me in order to get through these difficult things. And so what I do is I think about, try to distill down if there's a problem, or say you have a problem in a relationship or something, distill it down to one word, the one hard thing that's going on. So maybe it's fear, for example. And then I just go to the scriptures and I just look up fear. I mean, all the instances that it occurs. I have just some neat Bible apps and stuff. And so I just look up and see, what does God say about fear? And then I think about the opposite word of fear. And so it would be, courage. And so then I look up, what does God say about courage, and who am I in Christ, so that I can see, what does he say about the work that the enemy is trying to do, because fear is not from the Lord. And then I can see, what is the benefit to me as a citizen of the kingdom of heaven? And so I think what it allows me to do is just to kind of pass whatever it is that I'm dealing with through that. There's an illustration I had one day. I was just really praying through it. And those, it's like the 5 metal balls. It's called a Newton's cradle. I took physics in high school and had to get extra help every day, so it's a wonder that I passed it. But it's these 5 balls, and you pull the one out and it smacks, and then they go out on the other side. And so they keep hitting. And I think that life feels that way a lot, like that it feels like there's these highs and lows. But a lot of times I think we operate and allow ourselves to be a pendulum where the circumstances of our life are the things that are determining the swing. And I think that in Christ, we're really more like a Newton's cradle, where the force passes through the center of something and everything is impacted through that one point. And so I feel like when I look at the scriptures and I can see the negative thing that the enemy's trying to do, and then the positive gift of heaven that I am entitled to, it allows there to be kind of a centeredness and a grounding, so that the circumstances aren't the definer of
That's
the
very
joy,
good. I like what you said when you said that you're identifying what it is. Because I think a lot of people, they just feel, I feel yuck. I feel down.
Right.
I feel like this is a lousy month, a lousy week. But you're saying that I want to go and almost discover the word. I want to synthesize it down to one word. So, if you're fearful, maybe you're dealing with jealousy, maybe you're dealing with once you find that word, now it's kind of like, how do you speak to a mountain that you don't know is there?
Right. I think I sort of think of it in terms of, it allows us to put our sin to work for the kingdom, because the enemy is going to do the thing that he wants to do, to make you afraid, to make you fearful, to make you doubt. He's going to do these things. So if you can distill down how you're feeling, if you can determine specifically what is the root kind of thing that's going on, then you can actually find the opposite. And if you can't think about it, just antonym.com, you just look it up and find the opposite word. And so if you can discover the negative, then you totally have access to the benefits of heaven.
I hear lots of people say, I'm just upset.
Right.
There's lots of words that we use that encompass every negative emotion.
Right.
But if we can find out why, because I feel used, because I feel rejected. You're so right. Now you can deal with it. And now in the book, tell me a little bit more, because you're trying to get people to get out of this controlled, staid, everyday, it's almost like Groundhog Day living.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
What are some of the other things that you're encouraging or teaching people in there?
One thing that I've talked about in Curious Faith is the idea of tiny yeses. And I think a lot of times we look at life and we see people that are making these big grand steps. We think, oh, this person is going to do this or going to do that. And it looks like this ginormous move to some of us. But for people who are living in step with the Spirit along the way, I think that really the moves that we make in our lives are just a series of tiny yeses. You look at David, he was in the pasture before he was in the palace. And so he was an armor bearer before he knew what it was like to go into battle as a king. So I think we forget that the Lord in his kindness does these kind of tiny steps. He's a gentleman. He doesn't overwhelm us, And so I think that when we can be curious about like the next thing right this minute, or this moment right now, or just cultivating curiosity in our everyday lives, I think it feels like a much gentler process
Wow.
to possibility that we haven't imagined, so.
That's so good. We're going to take a break right now. My guest today is Logan Wolfram, who wrote this book, Curious Faith. I want to encourage you to get it. It's Rediscovering Hope in the God of Possibility. We'll be right back.
Something in my brain it was like the Lord just said, did you see that? I just covered the moon. And I thought, you covered the moon. And it was like he said, do you know what else I can do? Do you know what else I can do?
We believe Jesus Christ came to give every person on this planet a chance to live with power, passion, and purpose. Through award-winning, world-class TV programs like this and life-giving resources in Spanish, French, Italian, Russian, and Hindi, Spirit Contemporary is changing lives around the world. Considerable expenses are involved, but each person reached is absolutely worth the cost. People are saved, their faith revived, eternities transformed, all because of your support. With your donation today, you will receive today's special resource.
Church. God created church for you, to have a home, a family, and a purpose. It's a place where we can connect with each other, where everyone should find love, acceptance, and forgiveness. But the church is not a building. It isn't the brick, the doors, stained glass, or the steeples. It's the people. We fill it with life and laughter. We are the church, and we can meet online from anywhere in the world. Let's connect at Springs Online today.
Get social with Leon Fontaine. Follow him on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube. With instant access through any mobile device, you can stay up to date with the latest news, comment on your favorite episodes, and watch insider sneak peeks. Bonus videos, inspirational posts, and practical teaching are just clicks away. Spirit Contemporary, social media. Get social with Leon Fontaine.
Welcome back. My guest today is Logan Wolfram, and we're talking about curious faith. Now, in the book, you tell some stories. Tell me a story that has really helped you when it comes to just keeping this life that you want to live of adventure and curious.
I think the story, and it really is the beginning of the book for me, because it was the beginning of a turning point. You know, there's those moments in your life when something happens, and I don't think we have tons of them, but you can pinpoint the exact moment that things really changed. And several years ago, I went through a really difficult time. I lost a baby, entering a second trimester, and I was the first person that I knew that had had anything like that happen. And we ended up leaving a church where we'd been for a really long time, and it was just a really difficult season. And I'd had to have a D&C done because I was so pregnant. And the day after I had the D&C, I was really sick from the surgery and was sitting on the sofa, and a friend of mine called me. She was 8 weeks ahead of me in a pregnancy, and we were going to find out what she was having that day. And so I was waiting on her call, and she called and she said, it's a boy, but something's very wrong. Something's very, very wrong. And I remember sitting there thinking, Lord, not hers too, not hers too. And so we went through the next several months. This was in the very beginning of November. And the next several months, she was found out that the baby had a fatal diagnosis. Only 8 recorded cases in history of this particular thing. And so we were walking. I was, dealing with my own grief, my own sense of loss from leaving the church, and then walking towards, a potential burial of my friend's unborn child. And I remember in February that year, just cleaning off the counter in my kitchen and looking outside, just something caught my eye out the window. And I went and leaned against the door. We had like a glass door. And I leaned against it and looked up into the sky, and there was a lunar eclipse that night. And I just remember looking, and the moon looked like a tangerine. It was just three-dimensional, and it was orange. And something in my brain it was like the Lord just said, did you see that? I just covered the moon. And I thought, you covered the moon. And it was like he said, do you know what else I can do? Do you know what else I can do? And that moment for me, I thought, if you can cover the moon, how much smaller than a baby? How much smaller to heal? How much smaller to save and to redeem? And you just aligned the planets, And so that moment for me, it was like something just broke open, and I'd had this very tidy version of God. I think that zipped up in a denim Bible cover to church on Wednesday nights growing up, and stayed right nicely in there in the pages. And I think when I saw God cover the moon that night, I just thought, there is so much more that I have been missing, and I think that's the God that I want to know.
Right.
Yeah. So.
One of the things you talk about in your book is wild obedience. Tell me about that. What do you mean by wild obedience?
Well, that's kind of the tiny yeses thing, really, that I was mentioning earlier, because I don't actually know that that there is anything that's all that wild about, about our obedience, except that we actually just obey. Sometimes that in itself can feel wild, but I think that as we're following the Lord, as we're seeking what He has, that He does take us in these little steps. It is a series of little tiny yeses, and the Lord wants our diligence and obedience, not our perfection and execution. And so I think that that is the wildness of our obedience, is to be diligently seeing what the Lord has for us and taking tiny steps and saying tiny yeses to just the little things. And those, like when I was getting married, I remember people saying, you want to stay in sync with your spouse, because if you get a little bit off, that you end up like this. Right. But I think that with our tiny yeses with the Lord, it can have a positive impact, in that you say one tiny yes that was a little bit off course for where you thought you were going, and you have no idea where the Lord may take you. I never set out to write a book, and here I am. So, I think just in the kindness of the Lord, He has these plans for us that are just beyond what we have ever dared to imagine. And if we can let go of our own preconceived notions of what we think it's supposed to be, then He could just blow our minds. He can cover the moon.
Yeah. You have 2 boys. So you're a mom, you're a wife. And I was reading one of your blogs about, just everyday life. What would you say to moms that are watching, who, I think there are a lot of them sometimes that just get caught? Because, the lifestyle that we have today there's how many sports, how many musical things, and it's like mom's taxi, and then you've got to look after all these things. What do you say to moms when they're just saying, I'm just on a treadmill?
Give yourself a break, sister. Just cut yourself some slack. I think we've got to have it all figured out, and that we've got to have it all perfect. And, you know, I had a terrible parenting moment last week, and I wrote about it, and it was hard to even write about it, truthfully, because we all have just this.
Did you write about it?
I did.
Okay, what was it?
My parenting moment? Oh, gosh, you're going to make me say it.
You told the whole public already.
I did. I was really kind of to the brim with just stuff going on. I had a lot of work to do, and a difficult situation I was dealing with, and just, you know, packed to the brim. And you don't realize sometimes that you're standing on the edge of a cliff until somebody flicks you right over the edge. Okay. And a 9-year-old will do that to you when you tell them to turn off video games, and then it just turns into this sort of lunacy. And so my son and I got into a terrible argument. I mean, I'm just embarrassed by it. And so he screamed at me, "I hate you, Mommy." Oh. And I just broke, and then I said it back. And I have never said that in my life to my child. I'm a little embarrassed to be telling you this right now. But I just fell apart, and I ran downstairs, and I called my husband, and I was like, "I'm terrible, and I can't believe that I did this." And we just talked about it, and I called my best friend, and she said, "Go and pray, and then go talk to him and tell him you love him." And so I did. I went and spent just a few minutes with the Lord, and I felt like the Lord said, "My mercies are new every morning," you know, and the renewing of your mind, it's a renewing because it gets old quick, you know, and so I think that the Lord has so much grace for us, and it doesn't mean that, like, I don't need to figure out what got me to the edge. I mean, obviously, I've got some soul work to do to not get to that tipping point, but I think we're living in this fallen world, and there are hard things, and God does not ask us for that perfection and execution.
No. So did you talk to him? What did you do?
I did. I went upstairs. I mean, I was just boo-hooing. I mean, uncontrollably sobbing, just ridiculous. And he was uncontrollably sobbing. Aww. And I went upstairs and I crawled on the bed, and then we're just uncontrollably sobbing and hugging together. And I said, "I can never hate you. And I'm so sorry. And Mommy was so wrong. I should have never said that." And I said, "This is why we need Jesus, is because we are broken and we make poor choices and we do terrible things. And the Lord comes to restore and to make things new, and I want to do that with you." And so he said, "I could never hate you, Mommy." And I mean, we laid there for like an hour and cried and hugged, and it was one of the sweetest, I mean, it was awful what got us there, you know, but it was just a sweet, sweet moment. And then when I said, "Well, you know, we need to go down and eat supper," and my husband came home, and he had prayed over, we all prayed together and hugged and just, you know, talked about how we messed up and how there's grace, and we need to ask one another forgiveness, and we need to ask the Lord for forgiveness, and he is kind and does forgive us, you know. And so then we were coming down to eat dinner, and we walked out of his room, and he grabbed my hand, and he held my hand all the way down the hall and all the way down the stairs and all the way into the kitchen. And I just thought, you know, it's just the sweetness of the Lord to do that, you know, that you feel like there's been this thing that broke you so ugly, but the Lord, he sets your feet on a path anew, you know, and he makes the broken things beautiful. And so
it's true.
Yeah, so
there's so many parents who feel they should never apologize to their child because it's somehow relinquishing your authority. But I think telling our children when we've made a mistake we're sorry, it's one of the most powerful things you can do for your relationship.
I mean, how else are they going to learn to say I'm sorry to
if we
people
don't
when they're
do it.
grown up, you know? And I think it's part of learning to soften yourself to the Lord too, you know, to sit underneath grace. And so,
Thank you for being with us today. This has been great. You know, if you've been listening to us and just really being able to relate to sometimes what life can be like, why don't you get a hold of Logan's book? It's called Curious Faith. And get out of your box, get out of the regular routine, and begin to live with adventure again for the things of God. We'll be right back.
Devoted, a daily devotional created with you in mind. Easy to read and simple to understand. These 2-minute faith boosters are available in 8 different languages. Watch it on YouTube or have the booklet sent directly to your home. You can also receive Devoted to your email inbox daily. Become inspired as Leon Fontaine shares practical biblical teaching. Devoted is literally at your fingertips. Transform your life with this Spirit Contemporary devotional. Sign up to receive Devoted today.
Wow, I really felt the interview today was a powerful invite to really trust in God. Even when life gets tough, God has more for you than you could ever have imagined. The Spirit Contemporary life is one that helps us to be able to relate to people in a powerful way, really connecting with them, but at the same time, really connecting to God. You know, so many people today, they're not really connecting to God. They're on their own strength. They're focused on their own issues, and they haven't rested in God, begin to grow in favor with God. So there's just no power there. Spirit Contemporary is important because when you share the gospel message, but not in a Spirit Contemporary way, nobody's life is impacted. If it's not done in a Spirit Contemporary way, people won't even be connected with. But if you are spiritually connected to God and contemporary, meaning that you know how to connect with that person, a miracle takes place as the two meet. Being spiritually alive, bringing God down to them, and then being contemporary, able to help them understand how to connect to God. We'd love to have you be a part of this team. For $30 or more, that donation is going to be so crucial to helping us get to people who don't know Christ. And if you would give that $30, we'd love to send you a gift just saying thank you. And as we begin to go around the world in so many different languages, your gift is going to see someone's name written in the Lamb's Book of Life. God bless you as you go to your phone and become a part of something powerful, bringing the gospel to the world, but in a Spirit Contemporary way.
We trust that you are being blessed, uplifted, and encouraged in your Christian walk through today's program. As a viewer, you should know that we care about you. We value you greatly and appreciate your prayers. Did you know that Miracle Channel is taking the good news of Jesus Christ around the world through award-winning programs like this? We are actively translating ministry programs into languages like Spanish, French, Italian, and even Russian. We even air on television stations in the Middle East. This means that millions upon millions of people are hearing about Jesus Christ in their language, and it's all thanks to people like you. Considerable expenses are involved, so we need your support because each person who gives their life to Jesus is absolutely worth the cost. Each is of infinite value to God. You are very important to us. We care greatly about your spiritual growth, which is why we would like to get today's resources into your hands. When you support this program by making a donation, you are not only enriching your walk with the Lord, you are sharing Jesus with someone on the other side of the globe. Your donation transforms lives by reaching literally millions of people with the gospel. Call now and change someone's life today.
Join us next time.
It's not, well, I was teachable once in college, or I had a boss who one time had a conversation with me and I was teachable then. That's great. But the true power of teachability, the way we reach our full potential in our life, is by developing what I call in the book a lifestyle of teachability.